Hi, welcome to Why. I'm your host, Joseph Christopher, and today I'm going to start by talking about GLP weight loss peptides, their mechanisms of action, side effects, their pros and cons. But first, let me talk a little bit about myself. I'm 52 years old, and I currently weigh 153 pounds, but I didn't always weigh 153 pounds. My journey has been long and tough. And I've always been an athletic person. I've always had good muscle tone, high metabolism. And then somewhere around age 35, I think like most guys, I started to pack on some weight. I put my weight on in my gut in the form of visceral fat, which is a very dangerous form of fat and contributes greatly to cardiovascular disease. So I was worried and I tried everything. I continued doing resistance training and heavy weight lifting and things like that. Couldn't lose the weight. I tried all kinds of diets. I've always had a very good diet in that I always prepare fresh food. I don't eat out a lot. I almost never eat fast food. I don't drink any kind of soft drinks or soda. I avoid sugar as much as I can. And then, about 5 years ago, my wife, who was also struggling with her weight, said, "You know what? We got to quit sugar and carbs cold turkey." And we did for a while, and we did lose a little bit of weight. But as soon as we stopped, because it's really hard to keep that up, man, that weight came roaring right back. So we tried keto, we tried carnivore, and even that could not break what I had finally determined as insulin resistance, which is when your body simply can't use the insulin that it produces naturally. So I started this journey about 4 months ago, weighing the heaviest I had ever been, which was about 188 pounds. And so I want to talk to you about my experience as a middle-aged male. My wife is going to come on the next episode and talk about the female perspective and her experience. But for today, it's just going to be me. So a little bit of a disclaimer here. I'm not a doctor. I'm a lawyer. I'm not a doctor. And what that means is that I know how to read science. I know how to read peer-reviewed research. I know how to parse data, but I am not a medical doctor. I am not giving medical or legal advice. You should always consult with a licensed physician before taking on any type of weight loss regimen, including peptides. And so what I'm about to talk to you today is my anecdotal experience, and it should be used for informational purposes only. So what I'd like to do, because there's a lot of misinformation, there's just a lot of stuff out there, and it's really hard to begin. So what I want to do is just take the three main, what they're called GLP weight loss peptides, and talk about what they are, how they work, if there's side effects, what are the pros of using them, and what are the cons of using them. And then finally, I'm going to get into my personal regimen on how I've lost my weight. So the three main GLP weight loss peptides are semaglutide, tirzepatide, and retatrutide. So I'm going to start with semaglutide, and that's the most well-known. Semaglutide is a synthetic peptide. It's derived naturally from glucagon-like peptide 1 or GLP-1, which is an incretin hormone. It's naturally secreted through your GI tract, and it stimulates insulin. It suppresses glucagon secretion, and depending on your personal glucose levels. And so what it's called a GLP-1 agonist. And what that means is that it works by using that GLP-1 pathway to slow, or in some cases almost paralyze, the intestinal tract. to slow the digestion process. And what this does, it simply makes you feel full because you are full. The food moves very slowly through your GI tract. The downside of this is that semaglutide comes with a lot of GI side effects. Most common are nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, and or constipation. And don't ask me how that can happen at the same time, but it does. So it really stops your desire to eat. But it does so because you feel like shit every time you eat. And it gets to the point where you feel like shit even if you think about eating. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's very effective. So it's not optimal in my opinion. Another downside is that the mechanism of weight loss seems to be the inducement of caloric deficit. And that simply means you are not eating enough to replace the calories that you burn, and therefore you are in a caloric deficit, which causes your body to lose weight. Sounds great. The only problem with that is that it's not really sustainable. It's not optimal for long-term weight loss. It's not optimal for energy levels. And caloric deficit basically leads to malnutrition and muscle wasting, which is a big problem with semaglutide. Studies have shown that 20 to as much as 30% of the weight loss somebody will experience on semaglutide is actually the loss of muscle tissue, and that's not good at all. Semaglutide, I think that's what they talk about when they talk about that Ozempic face, or that hollow look to your face, which is a consequence of rapid weight loss, but you lose that muscle along with it. So you just kind of look hollow. So I think, here's the pros and cons of that, right? So it's very effective. It's also the cheapest and most readily available of the GLP-1 weight loss peptides. Your options include doctor-prescribed, commercially available pharmaceutical offerings such as Ozempic or Wegovy. Those are the brand names for semaglutide. It's also available from compounding pharmacies under FDA Section 503B, which was designed to allow compounding pharmacies to create basically copies of drugs that are FDA approved in the event that there's a drug shortage. And you probably are well aware that Ozempic and Wegovy had severe shortages in the last year. People just couldn't get them. And there was a lot of issues because these were originally developed and prescribed to people with type 2 diabetes, so they could not access the medication. So the FDA allowed compounding pharmacies to get into the game to kind of alleviate that shortage. And unfortunately, that has led to competition to big pharma, and they don't like that. So Eli Lilly, who is the company that holds the patents on the injectable pens for Zepbound, they have gone on legal warfare in the last 6 months, and they are now issuing cease and desist actions against both compounding pharmacies and research chemical providers, which I'll get into in a minute, which is leading to now, again, some shortages because these compounding pharmacies and some websites just aren't offering semaglutide anymore. It's really a legal terrorism campaign to bully and pressure competition out of the picture, is what it comes down to. So remember, the peptides themselves don't carry patent protection, but their formulations do, and also the delivery mechanisms, which are those nifty injectable pens, they are patented. So anyways, a third option is what they term the gray market, and that is internet providers who provide what we call research chemicals. And because they're not FDA approved prescriptions, they can't be labeled as drugs, they cannot be labeled as for human consumption, and so they are sold under the guise of being research chemicals. They are also sold in freeze-dried or lyophilized powder form, and the user has to reconstitute them themselves using bacteriostatic water, which I won't get into in this in this episode. So here's the issue with that. Research chemical providers are completely unregulated. Much of this stuff comes from China. There's a lot of question as to purity, which could be a very big deal because you are injecting these substances into your body, which I don't recommend. So great care must be taken to ensure that they have independent third-party laboratory testing and that those laboratories are based here in the United States, because Chinese suppliers have been caught fudging their purity testing data. So you want to be extra careful with that. This is, however, the cheapest and most readily available option. A quick search on Google can give you many, many different providers there. So semaglutide, it's a single action peptide. It just hits that GLP-1 receptor. And it works again by lowering your body's ability to digest food, and therefore you feel full, and it dramatically reduces caloric consumption, thereby inducing caloric deficit, and as a consequence you will lose weight. I mean, this stuff does work. There's no question about it. It does come with some side effects. For some people, they can be very, very severe and cause them to not be able to continue. For other people, it's pretty minor. The next one I want to talk about is the one that's all the rage right now, and that's a compound called Tirzepatide. It's a dual agonist peptide. So semaglutide is a single agonist. Remember, it works only on your GLP-1 pathway. Tirzepatide adds an analog of gastric inhibitory polypeptide, or GIP, and that's a human hormone that stimulates the release of insulin from the pancreas. So tirzepatide has a greater affinity to GIP receptors than to GLP-1 receptors, but it does hit both. And this dual agonist action has been shown to produce greater reductions of hyperglycemia as compared with selective GLP-1 agonists like semaglutide. In other words, it works by controlling insulin sensitivity and thereby regulating blood glucose, in addition to its appetite suppressant characteristics. And so this is a really huge difference because it directly addresses what I think is the number one cause of exercise and diet resistant adipose fat, which is insulin resistance. And I believe a great many Americans today are insulin resistant. And that means that even with proper diet and exercise, it sometimes is very, very difficult, if not impossible, to lose weight. What is insulin resistance? It means that your body produces insulin. So you're not type 1 diabetic where you need insulin because your body doesn't produce it. Your body produces it. However, due to all kinds of different things such as inflammation, a poor diet consisting of high in carbohydrates and sugars that has made your metabolic process damaged, your body can't uptake that insulin. And so anything you eat, even if it's good quality food, just dumps that glucose into your system, and then your body doesn't know what to do with it, so it immediately converts it into fat storage. This is basically type 2 diabetes or pre-diabetes, which is the same thing. So when you're insulin resistant, it just seems that no matter how hard you try, you can't lose the weight. And like I said, I had tried keto, ketovore, and carnivore, which is a strict all-meat diet, high in protein, high in good fats, zero carbs. Still could not lose this visceral fat in my gut. It drove me crazy. Let me tell you something. Tirzepatide broke my insulin resistance within a few weeks. I've never seen anything like it. I mean, it worked immediately for me. So unlike semaglutide, which slows that gastric motility, in other words, it slows down your digestive process, tirzepatide controls hunger or food noise by regulating insulin and blood glucose levels, and also the hunger and satiety hormones such as ghrelin. So studies have shown that up to 25% more effective weight loss with tirzepatide, so losing up to 25% of your total body mass, compared to semaglutide, which is somewhere around 15 to 18%. So it is pretty significantly superior as a weight loss mechanism to semaglutide. And it also has less side effects. And I believe it's because it hits that GIP pathway mostly instead of that GLP-1 pathway, which is that slowing down of the digestive system. There are still side effects to consider. There's nausea, especially in the higher doses. Tirzepatide seems to cause more constipation. That can be controlled with magnesium supplementation, but it's still an issue. But I think the most impactful side effect, at least for me, and also listening to others that are on tirzepatide, is full body fatigue. This stuff can knock you out. I mean, I know people that just want to sleep for a day after taking an injection of tirzepatide. It definitely makes it difficult sometimes. I suspect this fatigue is caused by the malnutrition that accompanies caloric deficit. And so those taking tirzepatide should be very careful, I think, to eat a high protein, high fat diet to adequately nourish your body and prevent muscle loss, which is less than you would experience on semaglutide, but still a concern. New studies are showing that tirzepatide has these other unintended benefits. It seems to control and reduce whole body inflammation, which is amazing because many people suffer from inflammation. It's that nebulous, it's hard to pinpoint where it comes from, but it's a chronic issue that's overlooked by many physicians. And so a lot of researchers are now microdosing tirzepatide, not only to maintain weight loss once they hit their target weights, but also to control inflammation. So another potential benefit is that tirzepatide appears to have very positive effects on your lipid profile, thereby promoting cardiovascular health, and it may be heart protective. So I'm not sure if this is ancillary to the weight loss itself, or the glucose control, or the reduction of inflammation, which is probably the primary cause of heart disease anyways. But for me, my lipid panels dropped nearly 100 points in 3 months of using tirzepatide. And that just blew my doctor away. I mean, he couldn't believe how fast my numbers came down. So it's very powerful. So all in all, tirzepatide is superior to semaglutide for weight loss. It may have additional benefits. It's got lower side effects, although some people, again, have side effects that would counsel them to limit or eliminate this peptide. So tirzepatide is available under a doctor's prescription under the trade names Zepbound and Mounjaro. And so you can go to your doctor and get prescriptions for those. They are also available through compounding pharmacies and also online as research chemicals. However, just like semaglutide, Eli Lilly and Company is waging their legal warfare to restrict access. And so I know that compounding pharmacies are starting to not offer tirzepatide, and even some of the more popular research chemical websites are declining to sell tirzepatide. The next one we want to talk about is a new one that has not made it out of phase 3 trials yet, but shows great promise. And that is a compound called Retatrutide. So Retatrutide is a triple agonist. Retatrutide stimulates activity at 3 receptors. So we have that GLP-1, the glucagon-like peptide 1. We have the glucose-dependent insulinotropic polypeptide, or GIP, pathway, but now we're adding a glucagon or GCG pathway. So while semaglutide is a GLP-1 receptor agonist and tirzepatide is a dual GLP-1 and GIP agonist, retatrutide is a triagonist because it hits GIP, GLP-1, and the glucagon pathway. And it's this glucagon pathway that I think really differentiates retatrutide from the rest of them. So the glucagon pathway basically regulates how your muscle tissue uses blood glucose to derive energy for work. And so, like tirzepatide, retatrutide regulates insulin sensitivity, regulates blood glucose. Like tirzepatide, it may have a positive effect on inflammation. It increases metabolism. Side effects seem to be more mild than tirzepatide and way more mild than semaglutide, but users report some nausea at the higher doses, also the body fatigue. Now, there are some concerns with tachycardia or increased heart rate. So you may want to approach this cautiously. And as always, you should consult a physician whenever you're starting some new compound or regimen. But of interest to me is that glucagon pathway, which not only can suppress muscle wasting, but could, in theory, help muscle gain. Again, it's because the muscle tissue, the cells in your muscles, have a more efficient pathway to access that glucose that is now regulated in your bloodstream and convert that to energy. So retatrutide is still in phase 3 trials. It's not available on the market. You can't get a prescription for it, although Eli Lilly is supposed to be coming out with retatrutide type release sometime next year, I believe. It's not available in compounding pharmacies, and so your only option at this point are the research chemical providers. And so, as always, use caution. Do your research to inspect sources and testing data to ensure purity. Most reputable research providers such as Sky Peptides, Peptide Sciences, and Aminos Research publish batch-dated independent third-party lab testing that you can inspect before purchase. So let me recap with a special note here, and I will talk to you about my personal weight loss peptide stack. So a word about appetite suppression and food noise. So what is food noise? Food noise is this overwhelming voice in your head, that inner craving that directs you to think about food and to want to eat, regardless of your hunger. In other words, even if you're full, you're still thinking about what you can put in your mouth. And for me, this was a huge problem. I mean, I'm trying to explain this to my wife because she doesn't have this problem. In fact, she has to be reminded to eat, which is a whole other problem. Driving down the road, I'm looking at fast foods and restaurants and billboards, and all I can think about is what's the next thing that can put in my mouth? If I'm at the grocery store, I am just looking at all the food going, oh my gosh, I can make this, I can make that. I would get on these cravings where I couldn't even focus on work. It's just like food, 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 food. I would be fantasizing about the meal that I was going to make later on. And then on the way home from work, I would stop at the grocery store and run up a $40 or $50 bill just getting exotic ingredients to make whatever dish I was going to cook. And what I figured out was that I was the one personally that ate the vast majority of that food. In other words, I had zero portion control. And so these weight loss peptides all control that food noise, albeit through different mechanisms. Semaglutide, I think, is the strongest in doing that. So even though that tirzepatide and retatrutide are superior for overall weight loss and probably overall healthiness, they are not as good as controlling food noise. Tirzepatide is better, retatrutide not so much. And so we enter a new peptide called Cagrilintide, also known as Cagri. So it's not a GLP agonist, and it has no weight loss properties of its own, but it is superior to everything else for the control of food noise and controlling appetite. It works on a completely different pathway called the amylin pathway. Amylin is a 37 amino acid peptide primarily produced in the pancreas. It's secreted alongside insulin, and the similarities of the two kind of synergize to control appetite suppression. So amylin has been shown to have a variety of effect in a variety of tissues, not only the stomach and the pancreas, but also the central nervous and cardiovascular systems. It also may be heart protective. So it also has a similar albumin binding mechanism as semaglutide, which is how these hormones basically are transported throughout your body. But cagrilintide does not have the side effect profile that the GLP agonists have. It seems to work psychologically. So in my experience, it literally erases the thought of food. I can't explain it. I just don't think about food anymore. I don't feel hungry. I just forget about food, which is completely alien to me because before it was just constant bombardment by my subconscious of food, 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 food. What are you going to put in your mouth? Right now, it could be midday, could be 1 o'clock, and I realize I haven't eaten. And then just that thought of food kind of makes me disinterested in eating, even though I might start to get a little hungry. I'm just ambivalent about it. It kills cravings. And that's another thing about Tirzepatide and Retatrutide, and to a lesser extent, Semaglutide. I don't know what it does, but it kills cravings, including alcohol. And from what I understand, nicotine and other addictive substances. So microdosing these substances like Tirzepatide or Retatrutide could have good effects on somebody who's trying to control addiction. I don't know how it works. I don't think there's any studies out there. It's anecdotal, but it seems to work. I was never a big drinker, but I like a drink every now and then. Now I go to a restaurant, even when I'm traveling, which is when I would normally have a drink or two, and I'm just uninterested. I have a beer or two every couple of weeks. They've been sitting in my fridge for 5 months now. I'm just not interested in them. So that's really interesting about these weight loss peptides. So again, with cagrilintide, I forget about food, but when I do eat, I have no problems controlling my portions. I am a glutton. You put a large pizza in front of me, I will eat that whole freaking thing. I just will not stop. I'm the type of person that I will clean off my plate. I will go for seconds. I will go for thirds. Not on cagrilintide. I eat a small portion, and then I'm done. My wife and I can go out to eat and easily split an entree. And then I won't even eat my half. I'll enjoy it. I'll savor the taste. It feels good to eat. But I just won't eat a full plate. And that, to me, I think is the real value here. And so what I like to do is I like to stack low doses of cagrilintide along with other weight loss peptides. So let's talk about my stack. I use a doctor-prescribed Tirzepatide compound. I use Zepbound. I have chosen to stay on the lower dose. I stay on 5 milligrams, which is the second titration up. So it goes 2.5. They put you on 2.5 for 4 weeks. Then they kick you up to 5 milligrams for another 4 weeks. And then you're supposed to go to 7, 10, 12. And then I think 15 is the top. And I just didn't feel like I needed it. The bad part of this is that insurance companies insist that you do it. So I had to go to my doctor and I talked to him and I said, look, I'm tolerating this stuff. I'm steadily losing weight at a healthy level. You don't want to lose too much weight because that can cause other problems, which includes the dumping of toxins that are stored in your body fat, which can cause all kinds of other things. And my wife will tell you about that the next time we get together. So I told my doctor, look, I'm tolerating this well. I have very low side effects. I'm losing weight at a healthy rate. I want you to flag my notes to my insurer to say that I'm going to stay at 5 milligrams. What it does also do is it gives me the flexibility to adjust my dosage. And so I supplement my Zepbound with some research chemical based Tirzepatide. Actually, no, I got it from a compounding pharmacy because in the beginning, I was having trouble filling my Zepbound prescription because of the shortage. So I still have some Tirzepatide left that is compounded, and every once in a while I'll take an extra 2 milligrams a week, especially if I'm traveling or if it's Christmas time and I know I'm going to pig out. And that's relative. I can't pig out like I used to, but I still may occasionally maybe eat dessert. Or an extra helping of something. And that's another thing. If you overeat on semaglutide, you will hate yourself. You will be curled up in a ball, probably having stuff come out of both ends. Tirzepatide won't do that to you, but you're still not going to feel good. You're just going to feel like you are bloated and uncomfortable, and it's just not fun. Retatrutide is less, but still you get that feeling like I shouldn't have ate that last bite. I gotta stop. You naturally want to lower your food intake. So what I do is I take 5 milligrams subcutaneous injection with the Zepbound patented pen right in the belly fat. And I do that on Friday mornings. I also take Retatrutide and Cagrilintide, and I stagger my days. So I take 3 milligrams of Retatrutide paired with 0.5 milligram of Cagrilintide, and I do that Mondays and Wednesdays. And so what it does, I think, is that it kind of keeps me level throughout the week instead of having a big spike and then you just drop. And that's one of the things that people will tell you is that they take their injection, let's say on a Friday of their Zepbound or Mounjaro or Wegovy or whatever they're using, and they might feel nauseated that first day, and then they feel good the rest of the week, and then somewhere around Wednesday evening, they start getting hungry, they start thinking about food, and by the time Friday rolls around, they need that extra shot. I don't feel that way, and I think it's because I stagger these peptides throughout the week. My body's got a kind of an even keel. And so what are the results? So far, I've lost 33 pounds in a little over 4 months. I've increased my lean muscle significantly. I've improved my hair and my skin, not to mention drastically improved blood and lipid panel numbers. My triglycerides went from 180 to 80 in 3 months. My A1C went from 5.6 to 4.9. My blood glucose went from 104 to 93. So it's important to understand that I also use TRT, and I'll save that for another episode. And that's a physiological dose. In other words, it's replacing my body's natural dose of testosterone. I'm not jacking myself up like some bodybuilder. And I also take other peptides for muscle growth. These are called human growth hormone secretagogues. I'm going to be talking about that in a future episode, but what they do is they encourage your body to produce its own natural human growth hormone, which starts to wane as we get older. I use peptides for tissue repair, skin health, inflammation, and lately I've been trying to combat the fatigue that comes along with some of these GLP weight loss peptides, with peptides that are focused on mitochondrial health. Your mitochondria are the energy factories in your cells that literally produce energy, or if you remember high school biology, the ATP, I'm sorry, the Krebs cycle, all that good stuff. So I'm using peptides to support my mitochondria, and that is starting to turn the tide as far as fatigue for me. So my wife, she's lost 57 pounds, but I'm not going to tell her story. I'm going to let her tell her story and her female perspective. She's had completely different struggles than I have, and I'm really proud of her progress. So the next discussion we're going to have, Angela and I, as my wife, are going to be talking about these challenges and these victories that we've had together. And so in conclusion, these are my experiences. Yours might be different, and that's okay. You may lose weight faster, like my wife. You may lose weight slower. That's okay. So let's recap. Semaglutide, single agonist, GLP-1 peptide, helps you lose weight, available by prescription, but also is available in compounded and a research chemical form, but it is inferior. It does have a lot of side effects like muscle loss. It's readily available. It's the least expensive option, and it does work. Tirzepatide, huge improvement. It's probably responsible for the bulk of my positive outcomes. It's a dual agonist, GLP-1 and GIP. It not only controls your appetite, but insulin sensitivity and blood glucose as well, and may reduce inflammation, blood lipids, and just has an overall positive impact on your health. The drawbacks are the price, the availability, side effects such as nausea and constipation, and there are some concerns about muscle loss, but not as much as semaglutide. And then we have Retatrutide, triagonist working on the GLP-1, GIP, and glucagon pathways. And that glucagon pathway, I think, is the one that may reduce or even eliminate muscle loss. In fact, there's some thought that it might encourage muscle gain, reduces inflammation, increases metabolism, and further contributes to positive cardiovascular health. Its drawbacks are is that it's got even less availability. It's got lower control of food noise or appetite. So you may have to stack Retatrutide with Cagrilintide. They work very synergistically together. If food noise is an issue for you, I use Cagrilintide. I love it. My wife doesn't need it. She doesn't use it. So I hope this discussion will help you in your research, and I hope to see you for our next discussion. And remember, be curious, seek knowledge, and always ask why.